You open your eyes and it's pitch black. There's no sound. No movement. Just the air so heavy it feels like the walls themselves are pressing against your chest. And then, in that silence, you hear it. A voice. But it's not a guard. It's not a prisoner. It's something worse. And in that moment, you realize the only thing keeping you alive inside this place is a single rule. Break it and you're done. This is the story of Russia's most feared prison, and the terrifying survival game no one talks about. Alright, so picture this. You're being transported to what the Russians call Sova, which literally means owl in English. And trust me, that name isn't just some random choice. It's 2019, and you're one of the unlucky few being sent to this place that's buried so deep in the Siberian wilderness. Even the guards joke that Google Maps gave up trying to find it. We're talking about temperatures that regularly hit minus 50 degrees Celsius. That's cold enough to freeze your breath before it leaves your mouth. Now here's the thing. Most people think Russian prisons are tough because of violence. Gangs, you know, the usual prison stuff. But Sova? Nah, that's not what makes this place a nightmare. The moment you step off that transport truck, something feels wrong. And I mean really wrong. Yes. The first thing that hits you isn't the cold, it's the silence. Complete, suffocating silence. No shouting inmates, no clanging metal, no footsteps echoing down corridors, just ... nothing. One former prisoner, let's call him Victor, described his first day like this. It was like walking into a tomb where everyone was still alive, but pretending to be dead. So you're probably wondering, okay, what's the big deal with quiet, right? Well, here's where it gets weird. The guards at Sova don't carry batons. They don't yell orders. They barely even speak above a whisper. Instead, they enforce what they call the owl protocol. And the first rule of this protocol? Cannot make any noise louder than a whisper between sunset and sunrise. It's roughly 18 hours a day during Siberian winter. Now, you might think, fine, I can handle being quiet. But here's what they don't tell you. In temperatures this cold, your body does things you can't control. You shiver. Your teeth chatter. You cough when the frozen air hits your lungs. All of those things, they count as noise violations. Victor told investigators that he watched a man get thrown into solitary confinement for sneezing. Another prisoner lost his blanket privileges for 3 days because his stomach growled during breakfast. But here's the really messed up part. The punishment for breaking the silence isn't violence, it's isolation. Complete sensory isolation. They put you in what they call the nest. A cell so small, you can't fully stand up, with no light, no sound, and no human contact. Now you're probably thinking, okay, this is harsh, but people can adapt, right? Let me tell you about Alexei. Alexei was a former Spetsnaz soldier. This guy had survived combat in Chechnya, had been trained to withstand torture, psychological warfare, the whole deal. If anyone could handle Sova, it should have been him. He lasted 8 months. According to other prisoners, Alexei started talking to himself around month 6. But here's the thing. He was whispering these conversations. Still following the rules, you know? The guards couldn't technically punish him for talking to himself quietly. But then something changed. Other inmates noticed Alexei would sit perfectly still for hours, just staring at the same spot on his cell wall. When they asked him what he was looking at, he'd whisper back, "The owl. Can't you see it? It's been watching us this whole time." There was no owl. There was nothing on that wall. By month 8, Alexei wasn't eating, wasn't sleeping, wasn't even acknowledging other people existed. And then one morning the guards found him. Now here's what the official report says. Prisoner experienced acute psychological distress leading to self-harm. That's it, case closed. But the other prisoners, they tell a different story. See, here's what took me months of research to figure out. Sova isn't actually designed to house dangerous criminals. It's most of the prisoners there. They're political dissidents, journalists, activists, people who spoke out against the government. And suddenly the whole silence protocol makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? This isn't just punishment. This is systematic psychological conditioning. They're not trying to rehabilitate these people. They're trying to break their will to ever speak out again. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, psychologist who specializes in prison trauma, explained it to me like this. Forced silence doesn't just prevent communication. It attacks the very core of human identity. We think through language. We process emotions through internal dialogue. Take that away, and you're essentially erasing the person. But here's the really disturbing part. It's working, according to leaked documents I obtained through a human rights organization. Over 80% of prisoners released from Sova never engage in any form of public communication again. No social media, no interviews, no activism, nothing. They've been effectively silenced for life. Now, you might be wondering how anyone survives a place like this. Well, let me tell you about someone who not only survived, but found a way to fight back. His name is Dmitry Volkov, and he's probably the most remarkable person I've encountered in all my research. Dmitry was a journalist who had been investigating corruption in the Siberian mining industry. Big mistake. He got sentenced to 5 years in Sova on trumped-up charges of extremist activity. But Dmitry had something most prisoners didn't. He understood what was happening to him. On his second day in Sova, he started what he calls the silent resistance. Every morning during the brief hour when talking was allowed, he would whisper a different story to his cellmate. Stories about his childhood, his work, his dreams. Not to entertain, but to preserve. You see, Dmitry realized that Sova was designed to make you forget who you are. So he developed a system to remember everything. Bet, every story, every memory, every piece of his identity that the prison was trying to erase. But he didn't stop there. Dmitry started teaching other prisoners his memory techniques. During mealtimes, the only period when whispered conversation was allowed, he'd help them catalog their own memories, their own stories. He created what prison psychologists would later call an underground narrative network. Prisoners helping each other remember who they were before Sova tried to erase them. And here's the beautiful part. They started sharing each other's stories too. So even if the system broke one person, their story would survive through others. Within 2 years, nearly half the prison was part of this network. They called themselves the Night Owls. A little bit of dark humor in a place that had tried to steal their voices. The guards started noticing something they'd never seen before at Sova. Prisoners were maintaining eye contact. They were standing straighter. Some were even smiling. The silence protocol was failing. Now, when I say escape, I don't mean tunneling through walls or overpowering guards. Dmitry's escape was much more clever than that. Remember how I mentioned he was a journalist? Well, Dmitry had been working on something the whole time he was imprisoned. Using the memory techniques he'd developed, he was mentally writing a book. Every day he'd add new chapters in his mind. Details about prison conditions, guard routines, prisoner stories, everything. By the time he was released in 2022, he had a complete 400-page manuscript memorized word for word. 3 months after his release, The Owl's Shadow was published in 12 languages simultaneously. It exposed not just Sova, but an entire network of psychological conditioning prisons across Russia. The international outcry was immediate and severe. Within 6 months of the book's publication, Sova was officially restructured. The silence protocol was abandoned, prisoners were transferred to standard facilities, and several high-ranking officials were quietly reassigned. But here's what really gets me about this story. Dmitry didn't defeat Sova through violence or escape or outside intervention. He defeated it by refusing to let it erase who he was. In his book, he writes, "They tried to steal our voices by making us silent. But they forgot that the most important conversations happen inside our own minds, and those they could never control." Today, Dmitry lives in exile, still writing, still speaking out. The Russian government has branded him a foreign agent and put him on various watch lists. But you know what? He doesn't care. Now you might be thinking this is just one crazy story about one messed up prison. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. Sova wasn't unique. According to human rights organizations, there are at least 12 other facilities using similar psychological conditioning techniques across Russia. And it's not just Russia. China has re-education camps. North Korea has reform centers. And even some democratic countries have experimented with sensory-based punishment systems. We're talking about a global trend toward psychological rather than physical torture. Because broken bones heal, but broken minds, those take a lifetime to repair. Here's what I want you to think about. In our own lives, how often do we silence ourselves? How often do we choose not to speak up about things that matter because it's easier, safer, more convenient? Dmitry and the Night Owls showed us something important. The power to remain yourself, to keep your voice, even when everything around you is trying to take it away. They survived Sova not because they were stronger or smarter or braver than everyone else. They survived because they refused to forget who they were. The story of Russia's Owl Prison is ultimately a story about the power of human resilience, about what happens when people refuse to be broken, even in the most impossible circumstances. Dmitri's book ends with this line: "They built Sova to create silence. Instead, they created storytellers." And you know what? That might be the most beautiful act of rebellion I've ever heard of. If this story moved you, share it. Let others know about the power of refusing to be silenced. Leave a comment below. What's a story you refuse to let be forgotten? And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dive documentaries about the human stories behind the headlines. Because sometimes the most powerful act of resistance is simply remembering who you are. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep telling your story. Someone needs to hear it.